and bring up the agenda. Actually, I'll leave this up for people coming on as participants, attendees. Got Matt as an attendee, which is great. David Vine will not be here tonight. And I think Dan Warchall had already told us that he's not going to be here tonight. So, and I can't remember if Carol, but it's fine because we have a quorum. So we can move forward. What's it? Also, Gretchen is camping and was having trouble with her Wi-Fi connection. So she sent me an email just asking if we could make sure that the meeting recording gets posted sooner rather than later. That way she can do the minutes from the recording. So if she doesn't show up, we'll know why.
Okay, so we'll just start at 6:45 in any event.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I have sound. Can somebody say something?
Can you hear
Something.
Okay, we're back. Okay. No,
being quiet?
And there's
Hello.
Carol.
Hello.
Hi, Carol.
It's gonna be a short meeting, right?
So,
Right?
all right, and said meeting is going to start now. All right, let's bring this meeting to order. This is the August 2024 Newburyport Conservation Commission hearing taking place on the Zoom platform. This meeting's being recorded. The first item on our agenda tonight are the August 6th, 2024 meeting minutes. Anybody have any comments or changes they need?
there was several. Okay. For one, let's see. In the minutes section, part 3, there it says Bill Mullen abstain and yes. Got to strike the yes.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's one.
Okay.
On 59 Low Street, rather than saying wetlands have formed on the left side of the site, should probably say on the east side of the site.
Yep. Yes,
Uh,
agreed.
All right. And then on 3 Boston Way, I think it says Julia said the site previously, I think you want to say did not have any stormwater management.
Yep.
And down on Tom Hughes, somewhere it says conversation administrator.
Oh, yeah, you're right. It does. It does. The first sentence of the second paragraph.
Spell
She
check.
does that too.
It's sort of the same thing. Yeah.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
your choice. And then on that 3Q Street, Mark Drago, was it the city engineer determined the repairs to the seawall did not
It really
adverse?
was. No, you're absolutely right. It
Right.
wasn't. It was
Okay.
the structural engineer.
Okay,
City engineer was there also, so I could see why that was confusing. But it was the structural engineer determined that repairs and seawall, actually coastal structural.
Right.
okay,
Yeah.
That's
So,
it.
okay, great. Those are good ones. Thank you for
Okay.
paying attention to the details.
Anybody else? Take a motion.
Motion to accept the minutes as corrected?
Second,
Okay, roll call Steve Moore,
yes.
Carol Wagon,
Yes.
Bill Mullen,
yes,
Barb Riley.
I wasn't here last time, so maybe I should abstain.
Okay. All right, I'll say yes.
Okay,
All right.
I'll say yes too.
Oh, Dan, you're there.
I am. I
Why is
snuck
my
in.
thing? Oh, Gretchen made it too. Good.
What? Oh my gosh, everyone's here.
All right.
All right, welcome, Gretchen.
I don't
from
like-
Campsite.
Well, Dave's not here, right?
That's true. Dave's not here.
All right. So on to bigger and better things. Julie, do we have any Plum Island updates?
I do not have any Plum Island updates. Nope.
Okay. In that case, we have no certificates of compliance or requested determinations, so can I get a motion to open the public hearings?
So moved.
Second,
All right, roll call Steve Moore,
yes.
Dan Warshaw,
Yes.
Carol Wagon,
Yes.
Bill Mullen,
yes,
Barb Riley,
yes,
and I vote yes. The first item, continued from the August 6th meeting, Paul J. Lombardi, 5K Street, notice of intent.
Okay, so since the last meeting, the last public hearing, we went through the project with Matt Steinell, the engineer and consultant from Millennium, and he's here again tonight to present the revised site plan, and the revisions, I believe, just entailed some additional plantings. And I have that revised plan. So Matt, if you want to just quickly give the commission a summary.
Absolutely. So, for the record, Matt Steinhoff from Millennium. The plan that Julia has up on the screen is the revised plan. Previous to this plan, we had submitted a single-family home that was to be demolished and a new single-family home to be constructed on a pile-supported foundation. We went through the presentation at the last hearing, and one of the commissioners had asked us to work with the owners and come up with a more extensive planting plan that would add some additional environmental benefits to this particular part of the beach. I went back and I spoke with Mr. Lombardi, and he has agreed to add an additional set of plants on page 2. Julie, if you could just scroll down.
Okay.
On page 2, you'll see that there was 5 additional beach plum trees that were planted along the post and rail fence along that rear lot line. A little further south of that,
Oh, down
that
here.
right there. Yep, these 5 here are new. The 5 up by the road were always on the original plan, so we have those 5 being proposed by the road, 5 additional ones along the rear lot line there. And then if you scroll down just a little bit more, you'll see that there's 2 additional notes, one to the left of that benchmark, which points to the rear of the property and indicates that there are areas in this location where sparse dune vegetation exists that will be supplemented with 5 additional beech heather shrubs, which is a ground cover plant that will help to fill in those sparse areas, as well as to the left of where those 5 beech plums are proposed. There's that same note there for an additional 5 up there. So basically 15 additional shrubs, 10 beech heather, and 5 beech plum have been added to the plan to help supplement what's already on site. These are additional plantings that are above and beyond what's needed to meet the performance standards, as again, the only vegetation being impacted by this project is the sparse turf lawn that's being impacted, and that's already being mitigated with the 630 square feet of beach grass that's being proposed just to the right of the house as it's shown on the screen. So at this point, I think we've met and exceeded the performance standards. We've provided additional plantings to help expand upon and increase the environmental improvements on the site. We have a complete foundation and home being taken off of the barrier beach and a new home being put up in the air on piles. And we've minimized the impacts to the maximum extent possible within this footprint by utilizing existing parking areas and existing footprints of structures that are there today. And that was the only change other than we did to the right here, just below the zoning table. I did add the DEP file number to the plan now that it's been issued. I wanted it printed straight on the plan. So you'll notice just above the notes there. You'll see that we added where the general notes are, they're just above that, a little further up,
Oh, there we
right there,
go.
Mass DEP file number.
Yeah.
So that's printed directly
Great.
on our plans. Whenever we know it, we like to add it.
Yep, perfect. That's excellent.
And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions the commission has.
Yeah, so I'm the one who requested the additional plants, and thank you very much for doing that. The only comment I would make on the beach plums, to maybe just scatter them a little bit instead of having them in a straight line, but you know, I'll leave that up to you and the owner.
The owner, I think, would be willing to look at alternate plant species, locations, whatever makes the commission happy. I think he would like to see that in the form of a motion, though, that would give them the flexibility during construction to move them around. I think the quantity of plants is what you're looking for here, and if we can shift them around, we're happy to
I
do
can-
that and kind of spread them out a little.
We can make a note in the order of conditions that the locations of the beach plum may be you know, different than what's shown on the site plan, as long as, you know, five proposed are planted.
Okay. Anybody got any questions or comments? All right, not hearing any. Are there any comments from the public? Raise your digital hand if so, and we will let you speak. No, I am not seeing any. What would we like to do?
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second,
Okay, roll call, Steve Moore,
Yes,
Dan Warshall,
yes.
Carol Wagon,
Yes,
Bill Mullen,
Yes.
Barb Riley,
Yes,
and I will vote yes. All right, thank you, Matthew.
That
All right, to the next. Lisa Nardone, 5 Harbor Street, notice of intent.
okay. Yeah. Move Tom, let's see, what did you to panelist? All right. So Tom, if you'd like to go through this application, are you here? Let me
Yeah,
know how you want to do that.
And I think Ryan Clements may be out there. If he is,
Oh.
you could promote him as well.
Okay, got it. Yep. Sorry about that.
Okay. So good evening. My name's Tom Hughes with Hughes Environmental Consulting here on behalf of Lisa Nardone for 5 Harbor Street. Lisa and Pat purchased 5 Harbor not too long ago, and you may recall we were in with a RDA for some renovations on the house, and we had pulled a shed from the plan so we could try to figure out the best way to go forward with the shed. So this notice of intent is for that shed. So, you know, what you're looking at right now on the cover page is actually a pretty good aerial photograph. You can kind of see there's a big sprawl of kind of parking up towards Harbor Street. There's a gravel area right there. Within that gravel area, there are like a a handful of sonotubes that are in there. There's some stone. And then you can see, you know, there's a sort of well-worn footprint down towards the basin, along with some sand areas there. The entire lot is located within the velocity zone. So, and actually, so if you take a look at that, you can kind of see that one was clearly taken, that was March 23, so that was probably beat up a little bit in those winter storms we had early in 23. But you can kind of see where the sand area is. The basin is off to the left there. The entire site is also in riverfront as well, because the basin, as you know, is part of the Merrimack River. But you can also see that kind of gravel area. You can see a row of stones next to a concrete paver patio right in there. So what the plan is to elevate a shed up 2.5 feet above grade. It would not go all the way up above the flood elevation, because it would make it pretty much unusable as a shed to be that high up. However, your ordinance does give some discretionary language on the height. We could talk about that in a second, but if we want to just continue down maybe to the site plan.
Yep.
But actually, that's not a bad one too, just to see kind of the areas where it's not vegetated. Yeah, so on the site plan, you can see what we tried to do is we've tried to offset the impact of the shed a little bit by two or several different things. One is we'll be pulling out the sonotubes and the gravel, and we'll be vegetating a big area of the gravel, but even under the shed, we'll be taking the gravel out, and that'll be clean sand. What appears to be a deck on the side of the shed is really kind of a walk up to get along the side of the shed to get into the doors. And it's kind of necessary to the extent we are elevating it. You know, 2.5 feet above grade means the actual shed floor is going to be about 3 feet, you know, maybe even a touch more than 3 feet above grade. And then what we're proposing to do is we're proposing to put beach plum or other suitable native shrubs in an area kind of off to the side to prevent the shed, if it were to be in a flood event, to sort of prevent direct reflection of energy towards the neighboring property. We're also proposing to plant some of that sand area down towards the basin. To keep it simple, we kind of cut it short at the edge of habitat, but I also did that after reviewing that 2023 aerial, where it does look like, you know, you occasionally will get some water action lower than that, and so any plants we put in any lower than that are going to have a hard time surviving. So so the thing will be elevated on diamond piers or helical piles. We are mitigating by removing some sort of elements that minimize dune function. We are allowing for full movement of sand underneath with the 2.5 foot open area underneath. And the real issue here is that they really just don't have any storage in the house. So, I mean, you can kind of see around the building, there's a couple of those deck boxes, and they just don't cut it. So they're really looking to have some storage to go with this. And then, as I noted, the regulations basically say that a shed should be set above the flood elevation or at an elevation determined by the commission. So we're hoping that the commission, in reviewing this, sees that we've made an effort to make this as elevated up as we reasonably can. And I will note, I think it will be the highest elevated shed in the neighborhood. There's a number of sheds that are, you know, up a cinder block or two at most that are out there. Obviously, many of them probably predate the regulation that you guys have, but this still will be elevated up because it's a shed. The elevation later could be adjusted, you know, with climate and all that. So because it's not living space, and it never is intended to be living space, it is something that is not difficult to lift up higher if that's ever necessary, or to relocate.
So how high would it have to be if it was above the flood elevation?
So the first floor would be 16 and the VE is 17. So to have the first floor, or the bottom of the structure above 17, we'd end up with the shed at about 18. And the ground in that area is between 11 and 13. So it would
Well, it
be
would have to be 2 feet above base flood, which is 17, so it would have to be at 19.
19, right? So the floor would be at
At like 20 or
19 and a half or
something above.
20. So you know, it's at that point, it's like a tree house. And how do you reasonably get things in and out of the shed at that point? And to that element, you see how big the stairs and walkway are that we have to use to get into the shed now. If we lift it up higher, now we're going to have another whole run of stairs. So it increases the aerial impact on the dune in terms of the aerial coverage. The higher up we go, it's more stairs, it's more structure to actually get up in. And I imagine at that point, we'd have to get pretty clever about putting some kind of a hoist or something on there to be able to lift things in. And it's just for a shed, it's just not practical to be that high up and have it be useful in any way.
Tom, it looks to me like the homes all around there are all, none of those are on files, correct?
Yeah, I mean, there's some that are on really short posts. And actually, if it's okay, I did literally just send these. I have some at ground pictures that it took me a while to get them out if they were embedded in an email. And if it's okay with the commission, I could share my screen and show those.
Sure.
Okay. So that's right here, the photos. So let me zoom out a little bit. Sorry, you guys are in the way of the control, so let me just move you out of the way. All right. So you can see across the street, this thing is just like a foot up in the air on posts. Most of the homes in the area are still solid foundation. So again, this is that gravel area. You can see the house next door is solid foundation. And these are the sonotubes that would come out. And the shed would be right in this area here.
Hey, Tom, can I chime in for a second?
Yeah, sure.
And if it's all right with you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. Ryan Clemens of Mead, Talleyrand and Costa, also here on behalf of the applicant, Lisa Nardone. I wanted to point out quickly that the gravel that Tom had been talking about and the tubes were placed in by the previous owner. And with buying this property, the applicant and Pat Cooney, her partner, were seeking, as Tom said, to find some extra storage because the house doesn't have a basement or an attic, and they're combining two families, and they're going to have families up. And they wanted to use this space, but to go about it the right way by seeking permission from the commission and working with Tom to offer a solution that is hopefully acceptable, and relying on that regulation, section 6J of the wetlands regulations, which says that sheds must be elevated at least 2 feet above BFE if determined, or 2 feet above the highest existing ground elevation, whichever is higher, unless otherwise permitted by the Conservation Commission. So we hope our ask here can show you that we are improving site functionality, which is already high. As you can see from the pictures, there's lots of dune grass, which Lisa and Pat are very proud of and hope to continue and expand upon to offer site functionality, mitigate the impact of the new structure below BFE with the shrub plantings that Tom mentioned to break up wave action, and then so that we don't set a precedent for the neighborhood where this is only intended for storage space, as Tom mentioned, and we'd be open to conditions certifying at that, and that there would be no extra fireplaces or decks, that it would just be a shed for storage. So I wanted to call those out real quick. Thanks, Tom.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so really, I mean, when it comes down to it, what we're trying to get at here is, and I'll get back to the site plan. It's just, it's a reasonable, I think, a reasonable effort to make the shed as sensitive as we can while maintaining its practicality as a shed.
Will there be stairs or a ramp?
So there's stairs. So let me zoom down here. So basically, what you would do is you'd leave this patio to be a little clamshell landing, and then you'd go up. Right now it's drawn with 4 stairs, and then this landing here gets you access into the shed.
Why not do a ramp if you're worried about like getting things in and out? rather than
Well,
steps?
it's really a matter of the owners think they can manage this with stairs, and if we do a ramp, to pitch the ramp appropriately, it would take a significant larger area than these stairs. So in order to get a ramp at a grade that would be usable, you know, even a 5% would mean we'd have to kind of do probably 2 or 3 turns out of here. And then the grade drops as you, then we might even have to make it bigger. So it's a matter of consolidating footprint. And when we've done analysis of stairs versus ramps for things like elevator shafts and all that, the ramps always have a significantly larger coverage on the dune. So if the ramp isn't needed by the client, we kind of prefer to stick with the smaller footprint of the stairs.
And this is just a 1-story shed with a sloping roof. There's
Yeah, frankly, I mean, I haven't paid a lot of attention to what I assume it's a you know, probably a shed with one of those, the storage loft space, but I don't think it's any bigger than that. And Ryan, you guys did the zoning approval on this? It's not like a multi-story shed, right? Just
It's a 1-story shed with a glass door and a couple windows on either side, and one side facing the house to let light in, because there's no power intended for here, so that people can actually see when they're accessing it. It has a pitched roof with what doesn't qualify as dormers under the zoning ordinance to give a little extra headroom. Pat is exceptionally tall, so it's going to be helpful for him not to knock his head in there every time he gets in. But no, just a simple 1-story shed.
Okay,
It's a
any
large,
other question? Oh, go ahead.
it's a very large shed, and I was just thinking, I mean, if you have sliders and windows, it doesn't make the shed that is usable in terms of storage. It just kind of begs the question whether or not it's going to be used for something more at a later date.
So I could clarify that on the door. It's a regular swinging door instead of sliders. If I had the plans on this computer, I'd ask to show my screen. And the windows are there again to let light in, because there's no electricity running to the shed for any other lights to see what's in it. And again, we are open to imposing conditions requiring it to be storage space only and no living space, and that's folded in with the definition of sheds and accessory structures too.
yeah, I guess
and that could be a perpetual condition that when you issue the COC stays with the land.
Can I just ask a question about that? Did zoning, when you went through zoning with this, did they have any statements regarding use of this accessory structure?
They did not, no.
Did they
So the only-
specify that there's no electricity, or is that just something that you are saying that there won't be?
That's what we presented to them. And I'm going to double check now to see if it made it into its decision, but off the top of my head, I don't believe it was noted by them.
So no plumbing, no faucets, no electricity.
None of that.
I mean, I don't know the issue with whether or not electricity is, but if I had a storage shed, I'd want some lights in it so I could find stuff.
Yeah, I would too. It really wouldn't matter to me one
But-
way or another, but
Yeah. I guess I'm saying it would be okay with me if they did have electricity, so.
yeah, that's a non-issue, really.
Yeah,
As somebody with a couple sheds, I would not want to preclude that. I have not put electricity in my sheds, but I curse every time I have to go in there in the dark. So,
I did put electricity in my shed because I cursed every time I went there in the dark.
but regardless, in terms of, any concern that it would be turned into something other than a shed, a perpetual condition would be perfectly acceptable to us.
the only concern I have is setting precedent for it not being above flood level. And I don't know how we would pose that in any solution that we might have if we permit this.
I mean, so first of all, we offer some mitigation, right? So if the precedent is that you approve this, somebody else would have to come up with some level of mitigation. And I also think that the regs do give you some wiggle room, and so the precedent is that you take advantage of that wiggle room when the circumstance sort of presents itself as making sense. And I think given the site grades here, it's unreasonable for somebody to have this accessory structure that far up in the air to fully comply with that without the wiggle room that you guys put in the regs. And if it helps, we could throw a few more plants and make that planting a little more three-dimensional, maybe put it so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 plants. If we did 6 and kind of made it into more of a triangular pattern, give you a little bit more. So in other words, I forgot this is my screen, so we could like put one here and here and here and just try to give this a little bit more, 3 dimensions to it. But I think, we're getting the vegetation, standard. Under the Wetland Protection Act, it's an accessory structure, so it's allowed to be approved and not necessarily have to meet the other stricter requirements. So it's really ordinance only, and I think that getting a shed 2.5 feet up in the air is certainly more stringent than the state
Well,
one.
I think, Tom, under the Wetlands Protection Act, as an accessory structure, it's only exempt if it's meets certain conditions.
It's not exempt, but it's allowable, and it says, notwithstanding the provisions above, an accessory structure can be allowed. Things such as a driveway, a shed. It lists out those things. So
Yeah.
it doesn't necessarily have to meet all the other stricter requirements of that section of the act. And we do have a DEP file number, and they have not put any comments.
No.
So,
Alright.
but again, I think it's a reasonable accommodation, and we've lifted this up again higher than I think any shed in the area.
Yeah, I would like to let, I assume Pat's iPhone is Pat, the owner. Can we let him speak, Julie?
Yep. Okay. Yep. Pat, you're welcome to unmute yourself.
I believe I have. I think I'm on board.
You are.
Yeah, I raised my hand when you guys were discussing the electrical and the plumbing and things like that. We were hoping to have electrical in the shed. the size of the shed, you know, we would like to have a light in the center of the shed so we could see what we were looking at, but definitely no plumbing is planned for that or anything of that nature. And as far as the size, Lisa and I were a blended family. We have 5 children. Those 5 kids have now produced 5 grandchildren, and we got another one on the way. So we do have a lot of things that we have here, and we do have like a 10 by 15 foot storage unit over in Salisbury that we would love to get out of. So that's why we came up with the square footage as far as the size and things like that. So I don't know if there's any questions that I can help answer or.
Well, I just have one for Tom that maybe you can jump in on. Tom, were you suggesting moving some of the plants that were there or adding a couple more?
Oh, no. So what I'm saying is we're showing at an addition of plantings this area. And I'm saying that what we could do is right now it's sort of shown, I don't want to use the term hedgerow, but sort of in a row. And what we could do would be to stagger some in and like another 6 in order to kind of create a little more 3-dimension.
Yeah, those are all newly proposed. And Tom, if you zoom out a bit, we can see more of the beach grass that our surveyor had mapped out on site. I
Right.
note too that there's large pre-existing, and we're proposing to add more to mitigate the impact of the shed, and including taking out the gravel that was, again, the prior owner's installation, and replacing that with sand and more beach grass near the parking.
Yeah, and if I could just add, every day we walk out of our side door and those sonotubes are sitting there looking at us in the gravel from the prior owner's attempt to build the shed there. And it's really not a very attractive site. So the building, the reason we have the windows and things like that, we're trying to make something that's a little more aesthetically pleasing, not only from our side door, but even from the street. We're trying to improve the property. We're not trying to pull a fast one or anything. And that's why we're kind of going through the process and trying to do things the right way. Back where Ryan was just pointing about adding the seagrass, there's actually a really nice dune back there that protects us from any weather that comes in. And we're only here 2 years on the basin, but we've seen a couple of storms come through, and we're very happy to have that dune there protecting us. There's some good elevation there. I almost wish I could do a video and show you the dune. And since we've been here, we've actually been doing a lot of pulling of some weeds and things, and the beach grass has gotten much thicker, and we're trying to cultivate the beach grass. We love to see the beach grass, you know, blowing in the breeze and looking great. I mean, that's why we're on where we are, because, you know, we love the beach grass. It's not something that we're looking to remove. We'd love to add beach grass or any other plantings that, you know, you require.
Okay.
Well, you feel free to add as much beach grass and plantings as you'd like.
So we love it. We sit on the deck and watch and you know, there's a lot of wind out here, and watch it blowing back and forth. We love sitting out there on the deck in the evenings. It's super.
You don't need to ask us to add beach grass, so we'll put that out there.
Yeah, and to Pat's point, I mean, you've got elevation 12 here and up by the shed 10.7. So there is, you know, a nice mound here, and this really is really healthy beach grass back in here. So
since this would be an expansion of footprint in the V zone on site, we talked about that.
yeah, and right. So we did provide the and this is a cumulative calculation. So basically with the RDA that you guys already approved and this shed, it's an 18.9% increase in total structure on the entire site. The house is relatively small, so the shed does have, you know, a bump on that number, but it's still below the 20%. So it does not trigger the substantial improvement or the redevelopment definition. So this would not, you know, cause issues in that part of the reg either.
We can put a special condition in the order that only an additional 283 square feet of footprint would be allowed on the site. And that's into perpetuity under the.
Well, so I think actually this 283,
Yeah.
right, is what is based on existing. So there was room to add 283.
And you're only adding, I see. You're
And
not
we're adding to
283.
something. So there's only
Got it. So it's like-
1.1% left.
Yeah.
And I guess the point would be if you know, Pat and Lisa decided that they needed more space in the building and they were going to propose an addition, the shed would have to be taken out in order to make that work.
Right.
But
Okay.
they're you know, they're aware that we're at that 18.9, that we had a limit. And you know, it was part of our original consideration. We were originally going to come in with the shed and the housework at the same time, but the shed part of it turned out to be a little more complicated, and we wanted to get going on the housework. So.
Okay,
Okay, so I'm okay with this, especially if you add a few more shrubs.
Okay. So, I mean, why don't we'll make it an even 7 additional shrubs with a location to be field determined with the conservation administrator's approval.
Yeah, you can even go back into the beach grass area and put them there if you want.
Yeah. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah,
Julie,
we'll work with Pat and
how-
Lisa to find some good spots.
6
How will we
additional
be-
beach clubs.
Julie?
Carol, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of how we will distinguish this, what we're doing on this property from other properties because of the potential for setting a precedent.
I mean, that's a really good question. That's something that's important to think about because this is a large shed. We don't have any criteria for when something would be allowed to not meet that regulation. We're just sort of being very subjective in this case.
Well, I think if we say something about it being not living space, as
Well, but
opposed,
sheds shouldn't be living space and the
Right,
regulations. specific to
Yeah.
sheds.
if somebody wanted to put a house with the same, you know, sort of non-compliant elevation, I don't think we would approve it.
Oh, we couldn't without, they
Right.
couldn't. Right.
So-
Without variance, because there's no provision in the regs for that type of structure. I
Yeah.
guess I think what Carol is saying is that with this regulation that says it needs to be elevated 2 feet, unless the commission otherwise permits it, you know,
Yeah.
and every shed in the V zone and AO zone from now on gonna come in and not want to be.
So,
Yeah.
But
Mr.
is
Chairman,
it,
if I can make a suggestion, I think that the default, the way I read the regs, the default is unless you can come in with something to convince the commission that you've got a thoughtful design and you've tried to mitigate, the default is you're 2 feet above flood. And that you need to do the best you can to elevate it as much as you reasonably can. And you need to provide mitigation in order to get a shed, to get that flexible elevation. You need to make a case for it. Like if our grade here was 15 or 16, it'd be hard to make the case that you need to give us an exception to go lower, because then we could do what we're doing now and be above flood. So I think it's all site specific, and that unless somebody comes in with mitigation, there's no precedent for it.
And I'd like to echo the site-specific aspect too, because this is a unique site with already high dune functionality with the significant amount of beach grass and the mound like Tom mentioned. And we're offering more with the mitigation as well, both in terms of plants generally on the site and to disrupt any storm activity in front of the shed with the shrubs. And again, the condition that we'd be open to for having it be a shed only, storage only, and no living space.
and all that as well, Ryan, I think what also makes this a special case is the existing space that we're utilizing with the sonotubes and the gravel and things that are out there. We're gonna clean all that up and turn that into a new sand area. I mean, if somebody comes in and has area that has been, I don't know, I don't want to say destroyed, but modified or whatever is the right term, and willing to improve that area, hopefully, maybe that's part of the reason that the board would consider something.
We can make a findings, you know, clause at the start of the order of conditions. We can do some findings related to these elements that make this site different than potentially other sites, and make this something that would be acceptable where others might not be, including the fact I think that this location of the shed is as far away from, basically as far away from possible from the resource area as it can be, from the marsh anyway. So yeah, I mean, if there's ways to condition this or to write this order of conditions that would clarify why this case may be different than others.
I'll also note it's the only section, I think, in your reg that gives you the flexibility to go around the required height. So it's not setting a precedent for anything but a shed.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
All right.
We're talking about a 3-foot difference, right? What is proposed elevation for the
Uh,
first floor?
It's actually 3.5 to 4.
Okay,
Depends on what the framing of the floor of the shed is. If it's 6-inch, then it's 3.5, but realistically it's
No,
probably,
I think it's a 7-foot difference. You said 19, right?
well, yeah, so
You're starting
we're
at
currently
10. This is at 12 to get to 19. That's 7
oh,
feet.
right. From existing grade. I thought you were talking about comparison of floor heights proposed.
oh, that's what I was talking about, yeah.
Yeah. So our proposed floor is at 16. But in order to get 2 feet above flood to the bottom of structure, the floor, you add, say, another 10 inches, it would be at 1910. So it's 3 foot 10 inches higher roughly to fully comply. And then, Dan, to your point, then you're at like 9 feet above grade. And it's just, at that point, how do you make a shed work?
Yeah, I think you had made, earlier you had said that if you needed to raise it in the future, you could.
Right.
Is that what you're thinking about for the house too? Because obviously the house would help
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. So the thing with the house is the house foundation system is a much more complex thing to lift something. The thing is, typically these sheds, whether they're built on site or whether they're purchased and delivered, are made so that they're pretty rigid and solid things, and you can pretty easily, I mean, I've lifted my my chicken barn up with car jacks, and it's not difficult. And that's I think is a 12 by 12 structure. It's not difficult to, if we find that this area is all of a sudden getting inundated in the future and they want to lift it up or whatever, it's pretty easily done with a shed. It's much more complex with a house.
I guess my only point is if they were gonna raise the shed, they'd have to raise the house too.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, of the structures on this property, that would be more valuable to elevate. The house is the one, right? The
Right.
shed is not an entirely, complex structure, and if it does get damaged in a flood, it's not like the end of the world. It's pretty easily replaced.
But also the reality is the shed's gonna be raised up 2.5 feet, and it has less of a chance of getting damaged than the house will.
Yeah.
In any
Right.
kind of storm too.
Right. And the life expectancy of a shed is less than the sea level rise projection that you guys have us look at in the regs anyway. So we probably have to replace it once or twice before the 2070, time frame.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
All right. Do we have anything else? Hearing nothing. Any questions from Ellen and Paul, I see a hand raised. Julie, can you
Yes.
let
Oh, I'm
Ellen and Paul
sorry.
speak?
I was making some notes. Sorry about that. Yes, Ellen and Pat should be able to, or Ellen and Paul. unmute
Hello.
themselves.
Hello.
Hi. Hey, I was hoping that Matt would make a note on something there when we were talking about our property earlier about we're planting more shrubs or more plantings than are required, but if say for instance 2 years down the road those extra plants should die or some percent die and we're still above compliance. I wanted to make sure that we would still be okay. We would still be considered within compliance, even if some of the plants we plant die, seeing as we're planting extra plants.
What are you're referring to this project?
Oh, no, not on this project. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, no, the comments are for this
Sorry.
project.
Okay. Yeah, I thought you guys were done.
Paul, I hear your comment. We talked about this on the phone, and I will make a note in the order of conditions about the amount that is required versus the amount that you are planting. But
Thank you.
again, that's another.
Okay. Oh, we're talking about the previous one. Okay. All right then. On that note, do we have what do we want to do?
Motion to close the public hearing?
Second,
All right, roll call, Steve Moore,
Yes.
Dan Warshaw,
Yes.
Carol Wagon,
yes.
Bill Mullen,
Yes.
Barb Riley,
Yes,
and I vote yes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Tom and Ryan and Pat.
Thank you.
Alrighty. Can I get a motion to close the public hearings?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, Steve Moore,
Yes.
Dan Warshaw,
Yes.
Carol Wagon,
Yes.
Bill Mullen,
Yes.
Barb Riley,
yes.
and I vote yes. All right, we have orders of conditions. First for Paula Marty, 5K Street.
Okay, so for 5K Street, they've added the 5 new beach plum along the rear property line, and they've added 10 new beach heather plants to the planting plan, to the site plan, and that is above and beyond what is technically required as mitigation to compensate for the impacts on the site. And so, as you heard from Paul, the property owner, he wants to make sure that at the end of the day, after 2 years of monitoring, if all of that has not survived, that they would only be held to what was technically required to mitigate for the impacts. And so we can make that a special condition if that's something that.
Sure, that sounds fair to me.
Okay, yep, works for me.
And the location of the proposed beach plums may be subject to change on site, depending on where.
Okay,
So we would only be holding them to replace plantings that were in the initial scheme, is
Yes,
that?
in the initial site plan.
Okay.
And
So
that was,
essentially, everything except the everything except the 15 new shrubs, which are intended to be planted and shall be planted, but in terms of monitoring for survival, it would be the square footage as presented of planted area as presented in the original planting plan. And I wouldn't want to say that it's just that area of plantings in the original site plan, because I think one of the benefits of having them do the new beach plums and the new beach heather is that sometimes, the June grass doesn't take, the American beach grass doesn't do well. And that's when we wish that we had asked them to do more of these shrubs and other species. So I think that we need to just take a look at that as a combined approach and just hold them to the square footage of impact mitigation. That makes sense.
yeah, Okay. Everybody okay with that?
Yep.
All right, then. I got a motion to issue the order of conditions.
So moved.
Second,
Okay, roll call, Steve Moore,
Yes.
Dan Warshall. Was that a yes, Dan?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Carol Wagon,
Yes.
Bill Mullen,
yes.
Barb Riley,
Yes.
and I vote yes. All right. Next item, Lisa Nardone, 5 Harbor Street.
So the special conditions that I sort of heard from you all and from the applicant I was offering up during that hearing is that the shed will remain into perpetuity to be used for storage space only and not living space. 6 additional beach plum will be added to the approved site plan to dissipate wave energy and stabilize the dune. I would add that I believe the shed should be, the pilings underneath the shed or the area underneath the shed shall be left completely open. No, lattice or other structure shall be used to enclose the area below the shed. And then we would have some findings which would state that the reason why the commission is allowing this shed to be elevated below base flood elevation is because of its location adjacent to the house at the edge of the site, or a location adjacent to the house at the edge of the driveway as far away as possible from the water's edge. That the location of the shed is in an already disturbed area consisting of gravel and concrete sonotubes, which would be removed and restored with clean sand. That additional native dune plantings will be planted in areas where gravel and concrete are removed, as well as to stabilize the dune further closer to the water. And additional beach plums would be added around the perimeter of the shed to further dissipate wave energy.
Can I ask a question? They're leaving that, the concrete pavers, right? And that's acceptable.
They're not proposing to remove them. No.
They're not proposing to remove those.
So have we ever insisted that somebody put a shed up higher? Or is this the first time we've had to deal with this
I would
issue?
say that I think in certain, well, from my perspective in the office, there are many times where people come in talking about wanting to put a shed on their property, and if they're in the V or the AO zone, according to our regulations, it has to be elevated at least 2 feet above base flood elevation or the highest ground elevation, whichever is higher. And there have been times when that works for somebody and the ground elevation is the higher and they can just get 2 feet above grade and put their shed. And then there are times when an applicant or potential applicant just has to walk away and they've said, no, well, I guess I can't do a shed then. We have not had a situation in which someone has come in proposing a shed at lower than that required elevation and where we have said, sorry, you have to elevate it higher. Typically either just doesn't reach this point or they're able to do it above grade because of the site conditions. In this case, we originally told them when they came in with the RDA for the second floor expansion on the main structure of the house, and they wanted this shed, we said, well, it's in the V zone, and so therefore it would have to be elevated. And they said, oh, well, we can't do it then. It's going to be too high, doesn't make any sense. And they left that out of the original plan for the RDA. And then it was only after, they talked more with their attorneys and Tom Hughes that they found the clause in our regulations, which says, unless the commission otherwise permits it. And so they came back in and said, well, we would like to pursue this avenue with this clause in the regulations that would allow the commission to use their discretion and allow this to be lower than base flood elevation. And so that's how we ended up here. But no, this does not typically happen.
This is tough because the VE zone is so high versus an AE zone or whatever, so.
AO, and in AO zone, most of the time, there is no base flood elevation determined, and so that's typically when you just say, okay, you have to be 2 feet above grade. And we've had plenty of sheds in the AO zone that are simply elevated at 2 feet above grade. In the AE zone, then it would be 1 foot
Yeah.
above grade.
Seems like what they're proposing.
I guess from a practical standpoint, like what he said is probably true. I mean, I just keep thinking, why would you put a structure there? But I guess, they want to live there, and they would have to raise their whole house, and the shed would be almost a moot point, in the future. But they said, well, we would have to just rebuild it. But would the commission, meaning, let's say it gets taken out, would the commission ever approve of something like that again? I mean, because it just seems.
I think the goal of the regulations is to not have new
not have-
structures that
Yeah,
are in that kind of vulnerable position in the flood zone. But in this case, if the homeowner understands those risks and understands what's involved, and in this
Right.
case, there's a lot of special mitigation measures and features of the site that potentially make it make sense, then I don't know, it's up to you guys, but.
You said
It's
that there are sheds that are 2 feet above
Mhm.
the ground, and they're saying how high will this one be?
2.5 at the lowest.
2.5?
At the
like-
lowest point. A lot of it will be higher than 2.5.
they'd have to go another 3.5 feet higher, he was saying, 3.5, 4, almost 4 feet higher. It was looking at the plans, it was looking like 3 feet higher, but because of
Yeah.
what he was saying about the floor, you're adding another foot.
They'd be looking at the second floor windows of the main structure.
Yeah.
Can we revisit, can we leave this so that we can revisit it if the shed gets taken out by waves or whatever? I mean, just
They would
a
have to come
time,
back in for permits to rebuild it if it got taken out.
and we could reconsider again as well.
Well,
Yeah,
the shed isn't along the water though. From that plan, it looked like the shed is on the other side.
Step back.
by the
from
road.
water, but It's by the road, but
Yeah.
this site is on the water.
The whole site is within the zone.
Yeah.
I mean, and what's your sense of that dune really being protective? I mean, they made it sound like, that dune could get covered easily.
I think the site probably floods or has flooded or will flood. It's in the B zone. That's what's gonna happen. The shed is at least, the house isn't elevated. The house is on a solid
I know.
foundation. So the shed is at least elevated
I
a little
know.
bit. I mean, the shed would probably be better off. It might be hanging out in the
That's a-
shed during the flood,
The shed might be the only thing that survives a flood there.
right?
That's what I
Right.
was thinking, at least for the first, whatever, 10 years,
Yeah.
20. But
Yeah.
it's still, that's what I was saying, it's like the least of their problems.
Exactly.
Well, I mean, we know that Tom represents a lot of people out there, and if he convinces us to do it for this property, he'll probably try to convince us to do the same thing for other properties. I mean, it's not like people aren't gonna know that we made this exception. And if the exception doesn't really matter, if it's not gonna make any difference, then fine, but I just worry about,
They'll see it.
I mean, that's why I was asking about the ramp, because I could see where you wouldn't wanna be carrying things out of a shed downstairs, but I thought if there was a ramp, what's the difference if it's higher? Just roll it out, whatever it is.
I don't know, I guess I struggle with this whole thing because you have this regulation and I could see wiggle room being like, a couple inches difference, or maybe even up to a foot, but like that's such a huge difference. And of course it's gonna look crazy and it wouldn't be practical to have it that high. But it is the regulation, so it's just, I think we all have to be comfortable with a site specific. I mean, there could be more and more requests to do this, but I mean, should it require like a site visit to actually visualize that dune and try to understand whether or not, you know,
And I
there
was
is
thinking
text in
moving
there?
forward, I agree with you, Barbara, and moving forward, I mean, this isn't a small shed either. It's a pretty
Huge.
large structure. A lot of sheds are 10 by 10 or 12 by 12.
Yeah.
So, or 8, or even like 8 by 10 or 8 by 12. So I think you make a really good point, and I do think that we would see more of these coming, you know, next time somebody wants a shed in the V zone, might get this kind of a request. So I think we just have to be very careful about the reasons why this one is agreeable versus maybe something on another site not agreeable. And maybe the criteria is that if it can't, you know, be in a vegetated location. You can't be having to mitigate loss of dune grass, or maybe has to be a certain distance from, you know, the water's edge or another structure, or, I mean, I wish we had sort of thought through this and had some criteria, but we don't, but we can develop them.
It's very close to the other house too. I don't know what the setback is, but I'm surprised the neighbors aren't, you know, didn't have a concern about this too.
Well, the
Well-
neighbors would probably rather have it down low than up high for other reasons.
Well, right, if they're gonna have it at one at all, I suppose, but
Oh, Dan, I think
No.
you're muted. Wait, Dan, I think you're muted.
Yeah, you're muted, Dan.
We can't hear
Dan,
you.
you're muted.
Or maybe
Can you
he's not
hear us?
talking to
Oh,
us.
there you go. Okay, there you go.
Sorry.
I was just gonna, I'm sorry. I was just saying, the hearing's closed, you know, I feel like we need to stick to the orders of conditions and then, you know, vote on it. I personally feel like they did a really good job of adhering to the best practices that we are trying to enforce out there. And I don't think it's necessarily causing a precedent problem, really. You know, the application sort of stood on its own with good mitigation. I think it looks good. You know,
Yeah,
if a project comes up that just doesn't work, you know, we can just deny it.
Yeah, I agree too. We have been having a long discussion here that we probably should have had the vast majority of during the hearing. So I think we should go with what we discussed before, and you know,
Yeah.
if someone's not comfortable voting for it, then say no.
And there is flexibility with the regs in terms of the commission maybe developing a policy statement or an addendum to that regulation in the future if it starts to become a problem, that we can deal with that if you had a future date, and not as though
Yeah.
we can't wind back the clock.
yeah, I apologize for extending the conversation. I think it's more because I'm new and trying to understand, get inside all of your heads to try to figure out how to make
You'll
something like.
never get there with mine.
Yeah, no, you don't even try. But
I didn't mean to be I didn't mean to be critical in any way. I just wanted to not get too far down a road outside of a hearing.
Yeah.
right, and I agree. All right then. Anything else?
I'll make a motion to issue the order of conditions.
Second,
Okay, roll call, Steve Moore,
Yes.
Dan Warshall,
Yes.
Carol Wagon,
Yes.
Bill Mullen,
yes.
Barb Riley,
Yes,
and I will vote yes. All right, thank you, Tom and Ryan.
Thank you. Have a great night.
You too.
Right.
Okay, one last thing to discuss. Julie, you were discussing wanting to go to hybrid meetings.
Oh, yeah. So a couple things. Number one, next meeting, September 3rd, I believe. We're going to cancel that meeting because we don't have any new applications on the agenda for that date. And I'm also not going to be here. And so That's just a good coincidence, but we'll cancel that meeting. The next meeting after that would be on the 17th of September, which I also will not be at, but Andy Port will be here to sort of administer it.
And I will not
And-
be at that meeting.
You won't either. Okay. So if
Right.
anyone else is going to be not available for the 17th of September, let me know.
Oh, yeah, no, I'll be here. I would not have been here on the 3rd anyway, so, okay.
Okay. All right. Good. So that works out. So then, and then after that, in October, I think we need to start planning our next step towards hybrid meetings and getting back to in person. So I'm going to ask Diane in our office to schedule the senior center room for us again, starting, and we can decide. I'm gonna be gone most of September, so I don't want to hit the ground in October for that meeting to be in person. But maybe the second meeting in October or first meeting in November, we can schedule the senior center and get into this hybrid situation and see how it goes. Everyone feel?
Yeah,
good with that?
we won't be meeting the first meeting in November.
Oh, that's right.
That's the presidential election.
Okay, so maybe the last meeting in October, last meeting in November, either one.
Okay.
Okay, so kind of just get your brains ready to get back into the meeting room, which will be fun. Been too long.
Or some people getting their brains ready to actually go into a meeting room.
So are we gonna start out in the same room remotely to see if we can, or be prepared to be in the same room remotely just in case we have a problem?
I think we have to, I think we kind of like we get in the meeting room, everyone has their laptop. That way, but there will be a screen. And so instead of projecting, what I'm projecting onto your computer screen, I'll be able to project it onto the screen in the room. So you don't really have to have your computer, but I feel like we should, because there will be attendees potentially who will be at the meeting via Zoom. And we're going to want to be able to see them. I will also be able to hopefully have, I think the way it works is I'll have them up also on the screen, and everything on my computer screen will be shown up on the screen in the room, including the Zoom participants and that type of thing. So, I mean, I
So
guess,
will we all be recorded via our own cameras on our laptops or not?
no. So you could be on Zoom in the room at the same time and be recorded just like you are now, but just we'd all be in the room together. Or you don't need to have your computer, and the owl, there's that camera that sits in the middle of the room that whenever someone's speaking, it puts the camera at them.
Oh, okay, got it.
And so that's this owl situation. And this is what took a while to work out the kinks with for these hybrid meetings. But it's been working fairly well. We've been using it for our resiliency committee meetings, and council and planning board and zoning have been using it for their meetings, and it's been working pretty well. So
Well, the video works well, the audio is awful.
Yeah.
So I've a couple of times, even in the resiliency meeting when I was doing it remotely,
yeah.
I couldn't hear someone who was a foot and a half from the owl. It was all muffled and nasty, and I've complained to everybody, and it doesn't seem like it's getting much better. Just so we're aware.
Okay,
But
so
but you're
then
talking about us all being in the room together, but just
Yes.
whether some of the people looking for the hearings will be coming by Zoom. Is that what you're saying?
yeah.
Yeah, we'll hear each other just fine because we'll be right there, but the audio on the owl is terrible. So
And there may be a situation in which one or two commission members can't be there in person, but could attend via Zoom. And so then we'd have you on Zoom instead of in the room. I think ideally we want the quorum to be in the room, and that's the whole point of going back to the rooms, so that we're there. And the applicants can come there and see us in person and talk to us in person and, have a better interchange. So, let's just chalk this up to, we'll see how it goes. We'll kick it off, and we'll get familiar with it, and I think that it'll go well. If not, we'll just adjust and make whatever tweaks we make.
So, Julia, has anybody actually complained about us still doing it remotely?
Honestly, nobody has complained. I've had probably 3 total questions of why aren't you guys back in person? And 2 of them weren't at all complaints, just questions. One of them was really just today. And this individual said, can you explain why you're not back in person? And I explained various reasons, technical, practical, etc. And the person responded back, well, I understand, but it would be nice to have you back in person so that people who attend can have an easier time seeing who's talking, hearing, etc., etc. And that was, if you want to call that a complaint. I didn't really take it as a complaint, but that was the one I would say request that we go back to.
Well, I've had a direct complaint at me during my reappointment hearing. A certain city councilor would not vote to reappoint me because we're not in person right now. So he has a desire for everybody to be in person, but you know, I personally prefer it this way because we have because more people can show up. But in any event, that's it seems to be more, from my perspective, it's more of a counselor desire than other kind of complaints.
Than an applicant, or yeah.
Well, that certain city councilor was also asked why his last subcommittee meeting was by Zoom, not in person.
Well, you know, it's I have no comment.
Yeah. Anyway, Julia, any progress on that violation?
I would say, Steve, the progress is that Jennifer has an issue where they have not been able to get in touch with someone who has a violation. And so we're trying to figure out with Andy in our office how to get that done, which involves, we had in the past, we've used an not off duty, but like a retired police officer who sort of does this. He's no longer available to do it. Go and hand deliver, like knock on the door and hand deliver these things. And so while we're figuring out who else we can get to do this, I'm just going to send them another one and see maybe if it goes through. And then if not, then hopefully we'll find an individual who can do the.
Yeah, I thought the sheriff's department deputies did that also, but
who we're looking into that. That's how we got the last person. But we don't have an individual who typically does that right now. So I'll give you an update the next meeting. Hopefully we'll have a name or a plan.
Okay.
All right. Anything else?
Motion to adjourn.
Second,
Roll call. Steve Moore,
Yes.
Dan Warshaw,
Yes.
Carol Wagon,
yes.
Bill Mullen,
Yes.
Barb Riley,
Yes.
and I vote yes. All right, folks. See you second meeting in
September.
September.
September 17th.
All righty.
Okay.
Night,
Good night.
everyone.
Good night.
Bye.